Welcome to Disrupt Salt Lake City. My name is Jared Olson, and I am thrilled to announce who we are joined with today. I am calling this the three kings of human resources in Silicon Slopes. They don't like it, but seriously, these guys are legends. We have Dennis Wood, the VP of Human Capital at Mercado Partners. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks for coming.
Having me.
Yeah, you bet. And we've got Jeff Weber, the VP of People and Places at Instructure. And Trent Savage from Mountain America Credit Union, the head of HR there as well. How are you guys?
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
And we are fortunate to be joined today with the lovely Elisa Garn.
I'll call myself the princess in the corner.
The princess in the corner, that's right. And so what we want to do today is pick the brains of the smartest, coolest people in HR. And so that's why we've got you three kings here today. And so what we wanted to do to kick this thing off is learn a little bit about what you have seen in the HR profession and where you see it going. And so we would love for your opinion of how has HR changed during your career, and more importantly, where do you see it going in the future?
Jeff, you're on.
Oh,
Because literally, he looked at you and Trent when he said smartest. I'm not going to say where he looked when he said coolest.
That's right. Well, I think we're going to see a continued trend toward cultures of development and employee talent development. And in this talent market we're in right now, employees are expecting opportunities for growth and development, and that's what they're asking for. And that's why they're leaving the companies they're leaving to go to somewhere else. And so I think HR leaders in the future need to be prepared to address that. I think the second item, you guys can weigh in on this as well, is around technology. So we need to provide better technology for our employees that's more similar to what they experience as consumers. So when you're a consumer, you get great technology that can work and everything sucks. That your HR department gives you. We can't do that anymore. It just gives us a bad reputation, makes us look stupid, and it really isn't beneficial for the employees. And combine that with the balance of how we use technology. So automation, robotics, and everything else, and balance that with the employee experience is going to be, I think, one of the technology challenges in the future.
There's like that famous infographic, that has like all of the marketing technology, like all of the technologies in Marcom. It used to have like maybe a few hundred companies, and now it's sort of an iconic infographic. It has like 5,000. And I think, where is that chart for HR? Because I promise it's proliferating at least at the same rate, if not as it's as big of a chart, or should be. It would seem to me. So.
Yeah, I'd just add two things to what Jeff said. So one is I think I'd agree with everything Jeff says. I think that one of the key areas is data, and how do we think about data. And I think we're really just on the edge of starting to think about how does data and technology work together to help us. So for example, in recruiting, a lot of us are starting to use chatbots to respond to applicants and schedule candidates and whatnot. I think that's fantastic. I think a second area that we have to be really thoughtful about, and I've seen this here in Utah, is some of our leaders want to chase the shiny star, and it's like add the coolest ping pong table or the restaurant or these other things. And what they're missing is the fact that at the end of the day, you can have all those things, and they may or may not keep people, but if you're keeping them, a lot of times you may be keeping them for the wrong reasons. It really is, how do we develop great leaders and create an organization where people feel excited to come to work and they have confidence their leaders are going to develop them and help them be their best and have kind of the culture to do that.
So when you talk about those perks, a question I have is, now you're at a credit union instead of doing tech. Like, what's the difference of tech in Utah and HR versus non-tech?
So I would say it's very interesting. My experiences from Utah, in terms of the tech companies, a lot of them are small to mid-size and growing. And so a lot of them are still really evolving quickly. And I think a lot of them are still transactional in nature. And it's how do you move them up the chain. One of the things that's nice about the financial institution, MACU, is we have a lot of the right technology in place, I think, to help us really accelerate what we're trying to accomplish. Now, there's just trade-offs in everything, right? Whereas in a tech company, we didn't maybe have the resources to drive what we needed, but when we wanted to do change, we could really make it happen pretty quickly. Whereas in the financial sector, you have a few more of those resources and ability to do it, but you've got some of that older mentality of we've done it this way, and some of those things. And so those are real challenges. I think the key is understanding where your organization is in terms of their, maturity, and then how to attack change based off where they are in their maturity.
I'll tell you though, like everything I read about culture lately is really annoying to me, because I think what's happening is we're taking these sort of artifacts, we're adding them all up, and then we're saying that's culture, and that's fine. Maybe that's what culture is. Whatever. There's ping pong table, whatever. But like, to me, there's something much, much more valuable than those things, if we call that culture, and that is creating an environment where an employee's intrinsic motivations are in alignment with the intrinsic rewards that the company can provide, and then of course the company has extrinsic rewards that can also play to an intrinsic motivation system. And so I feel like all of those artifacts, the ping pong table, the shared office space, whatever, are being seen as sort of like a proxy for the alignment of those motivations and rewards, and it's a little torturous to watch. There's a great article by the CEO of Pluralsight,
Aaron Sconard.
Aaron, and I really loved that article. And his kind of conversation about, like culture and what it is and that kind of thing. I think a lot like that, but I do think that whole conversation might be causing HR professionals and CEOs to miss the point, which is, if you can hit the nail on the head in terms of intrinsic motivations of employees, which I'll just tell you, I don't think is mostly done programmatically. I think it's about leadership. Kind of goes back to Trent's original point, which is it kind of takes time and it takes thoughtfulness, I think. I don't know.
Sounded pretty profound, Dennis. You've been working on that?
Wait, okay.
It
So
takes
I have
time.
a follow-up question to this, because you guys are, all three of you, HR leaders within an organization that wins awards for culture, best places to work. You guys are constantly in the news. So my question to each of you is, how much, what's the word I'm looking for? Not viability, but how much, are those real? Like, do you think they're important? Do you think it's a part of being employer of choice? Is it really just an avenue of marketing and branding for the company? Or like, how real are those type of recognition and rewards? At least to you guys and your opinions about them.
You're looking at me.
I'm looking at
you.
Okay,
Start, Jeff.
I'll dive in.
It's your turn.
So I think they are important in the market because people look for those kinds of awards to decide what companies they want to go work for. But underlying all that, kind of seconding Dennis's point, you have to have a reason someone wants to work where you work. What's the underlying deliverable that adds value in the community or gives back in some way? People want that. They want to be aligned with the mission of the company and the purpose. And if they do that, that will naturally lead to the engagement level. It's kind of like a higher level view instead of
Right.
the ping pong tables or the environment. They have to have these other factors too that drive why they want to come to work every day and feel like they're delivering on something meaningful.
Yeah. I feel like a company has sort of like a soul, and then it has a story, and then it has a brand. And then the culture is like the set of things that are underneath that support the brand. But for me, it's all about the story. So like those kind of contests, they're great, whatever. They might support a story, but if the rest of the brand and the rest of the employee experience is inconsistent, it just doesn't matter. One way or the other, the company's going to pay for it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jeff. I think they have some external value, but that to me is about it. Employee engagement surveys, internal, external, whatever, to me, they're just a point in time check, and it could be dependent on so many factors.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of them. Again, I had a CEO that I worked with that was really important to go after those things. And I was very clear to say, I'm not going to go after those things because that is not a good indicator of whether we're successful or not.
Yeah.
You said we come from successful companies. That's true. But a lot of times companies can be very successful in spite of themselves. It's unbelievable how
A lot of
Crazy.
times, I'd say it's like the vast majority of the times, it's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, I'd say I've worked for a few companies that I would say were actually very, very good at what they did and were successful intentionally, and a lot of others was just kind of luck, or they hit something right that pulled them through all of the mistakes that they continually made.
So what are the measurable signs of success then? I mean, if those are just awards you get as a snapshot in time, and honestly, there's been some bad companies that have won those awards because they're good at just crafting an article and saying, here's why we're great, and then they force their employees to take the survey. Like, what is the measurable then?
Yeah, I think to me the measure of success is, well, first of all, let me say this, just so we kind of define it, at least the way I define it, and we can define it differently. But when you talk about culture, I always laugh because so many people struggle to define what culture is, right? And to me, I love Ed Schein, many years ago gave a statement on what culture was, a definition. And it's basically shared behaviors, norms, and values. So it's what behavior. So here's an example. At MacU, nice is a shared behavior. Like people are very, very nice. That is a normal. If you're not nice, you're going to struggle a little bit in that culture, right? Doesn't mean other things, and there's pros and cons of multiple things. But so when you say that to me, that what I think is important, you obviously measure success by the revenue and the profitability and all those external measures. I think you start to look at is your culture kind of sustainable to driving the business needs? And what I mean by that is, do you have a culture of continuous improvement? Are you really working to improve things? And do people have that? Do you have a learning organization where people constantly want to learn and change and grow? Do you have an organization that values behaviors, that cares how you treat other people? Like those things to me are very hard to measure in an output survey or something. But the way I think you can see it is a couple, right? One is, what's your attrition rate like? Do you have better than industry average attrition? You can look at it as a productivity measure. Do my revenue divided by number of employees I have, am I more profitable or productive than a lot of other companies? So they're harder measures to look at, but there's just this natural smell of the place and feel of the place, and you can get a sense in terms of, is that really driving productivity? Are we really winning? Are teams really being honest with themselves? Are they confronting reality? Are they dealing with the hard issues? Are we good at problem solving, right? And are we developing leaders? Are people, just one thing I tell you I focus a lot on is I think all great leaders, I've asked this question a lot of leaders. I've said, would you relegate your responsibilities to the business to me? And most of them say no, which I'm grateful for that they wouldn't. And then I'd say, if you won't relegate your business responsibilities to me, why would you ever give your organizational responsibilities to me? Because you shouldn't. You should not give that to HR. It's a line leader's job to manage and balance both the business and the organization. What our job is to help provide the systems and tools that enable you to be very successful at doing that. And so when you see managers that are really creating that balance of building the business and building the leaders, I think that's when you've got a real sign of success in an organization.
I'm writing an article right now called Killing Culture. And I'll tell you this, one way to ensure failure, I always like to invert, problems and questions, but one way to ensure failure is to misalign the experience from the espoused brand. So you asked the question, Eliza, are these awards programs valuable? I think they're I think they're just like you said, Trent. They're sort of like a place where a potential employee, looks to validate whether or not what they think is maybe true. But I'll tell you, there is some real risk in them, and that is that if an employee's experience is inconsistent with what that is espousing or celebrating, like that company is going to have a problem. Not just because of one person. It's gonna be multiple people. So.
Okay, another question. How does Utah win? We want HR in Utah this is Disrupt SLC. We want to lead that movement of advancing our profession within the state, within the Silicon Slopes, and the movement that's happening here. Now, amongst the three of you guys have experience at Procter & Gamble, eBay, Amazon, Novell, Shell, Ancestry, SanDisk, vSpring, Merit CX. The list goes on and on. You guys have crazy experience in seeing this in Utah and other places. How does Utah win? What do we need to do to lead the future of the profession as a state?
I'll take a quick crack. So the first thing I'll tell you is one thing I love about technology is I think technology companies are not afraid to challenge the status quo in terms of how we think about business. You mentioned Amazon. A lot of people when I was at Amazon talked about, is Amazon a retailer? And when you are there, it is a tech company. Everything they do is see things through the lens of a tech company. And what I would tell you from Utah is I think if, we've got to challenge how we do things. And I'm going to speak maybe at a bit of a stereotypical level, and I know this isn't true for all orgs, but I've seen this in a couple orgs that I've gone to. HR here is very transactional, and I think we've got to, and in some ways it makes sense. We get a lot of small and mid-sized companies, and people start up there or they go over into the function. and they don't really have these core, strategic HR skill sets, and so they never know how to take it to that next level. So I think, continuing to build great leaders like these guys here, and finding people that are willing to just break the mold of the transactional, not allow it to keep going. As I look in the future, I think the function has talked about HR transformation for several years. Unfortunately, I don't think we've gotten out of that, and we need to move on and really start making it happen. And I think that once we start really getting aggressive at those things, of challenging how we approach the work, and let me give an example. Not all work is created equal. I'm always surprised by how HR people think, employee relations, which is an important task that we do, is so strategic. It's not. It is a business essential task that we do. It's important, but it's not. It doesn't change the success or growth of the business in most instances. But we have a lot of HR business partners that think, oh, I want to make sure I keep doing that. Well, no, let it go, right? Or figure out where to put it in the right way. Build managers' capabilities so that they can do it. We've got to move on to the more strategic work. How do we think about helping our business leaders think about strategy? How do we help them think about org design? Org design is so much more than just changing structure in a box. How do we think about change management? When we're changing as fast as we are, we could really help our businesses be more successful. How do we think about building talent and capabilities? So in my point of view, to answer your question, we've got to move beyond the transactional as a function. We've got way too much of it here. And I think you can get around it. You've just got to be willing to take the risks, make the leap, and go super aggressive and find people who know how to do it. Get their inputs, get a consultant, whatever that looks like to help you get there. But I think companies can do it. Even on small budgets, you can get there.
So Jeff, I want to follow up on that question and ask you specifically, as it relates to the difference between transactional and strategic HR. First of all, those are defined very broadly based on who you talk to. But in terms of the compliance aspect of HR, your opinion, like how important and crucial is that to the overall effectiveness of a strategic HR person or HR in a company?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to have the foundation established around compliance and some of the transactional items. So you should automate, scale, and build a system that actually works around those compliance items as much as possible, because you can't have that not working. But that shouldn't be where you spend your time. So following up on what Trent said, you should build those transactional items so they actually function using tools and technology. And that's one area where I think Utah excels, is building and sharing technology advances to do things like that more automated, in a more automated way. And then you can help your managers and leaders focus more on the strategic function that they should be focusing on as leaders, instead of spending your time just running transactions and telling people what they can or can't do. I think the role of the HR's police department is long dead and shouldn't be the case at all. And we should focus more on how to leverage the core in the business, which is probably another point we should talk more about. How do we help move beyond the traditional HR role? And how do we become a true business partner, to your point, Trent? Not just telling people who they can or can't fire, but how do we actually help them run the business, which means we need to know the business exceptionally well. And that's what I appreciate about Trent and Dennis's backgrounds. They actually know the business really well, and they can speak as a business leader and not just as an HR practitioner. And I think you have to do both really well to be successful at that.
So how can an HR practitioner get that knowledge, in your opinion?
So for me, there's a few different items. One is take a stretch assignment. Do something outside of the role. And we actually should recruit more people to come into HR from other functional areas who actually know how to run a business.
That's what I think.
And then we can teach them the HR skills they need to have, so they come in with a different perspective as a business owner already, and then they can leverage that capability as well.
I get a lot of, I interview, still a lot of executives who are maybe looking for their next gig, and I've become kind of this person that helps companies find executives and executives find their gig. And then that kind of, extends to like recently graduated MBAs, and they'll say, what do I have to do to be a CEO? And I'll say, go sell some stuff, and it's like, we have all of these MBAs who want to graduate from business school and go into strategy for some cool, 50 to 100 person company. And it turns out that companies with 50 to 100 employees don't have a head of strategy. And so it's sexy, it's cool, it's whatever, but if you want to become a CEO, you have to know how to sell stuff. And I have similar thoughts this way about HR. I feel like if you're going to go into HR and you're going to be consulting with all the business leaders about their different business disciplines, you better kind of know something about those disciplines, Otherwise, it's an inevitability that you will become kind of an administrator, sort of consigned to manage against the worst case scenario. instead of helping the company secure the upside. Right.
So, Dennis, how do we get more non-HR people in HR when HR is the roadblock? Like, it's the HR team that's hiring their team, and they're like, oh, you don't have HR experience, so you can't be hired. How do we change that and find people in operations to come in?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I wish I had the answer to that question. Do you know how many of those MBAs actually then go sell some crud, and then if they, like, there are very few people. I'll give you an example. I can name one of them. Mike Dutton was the CEO of Wunder Dairies. I think he's now the CEO of Ragnar. When he graduated from Stanford, I remember telling him, you got to go sell some stuff, and he did, and so it's no surprise to me. But the rest of them just simply don't. I kind of feel like, I struggle to tell professionals, because a little bit sometimes I feel like, those who can't market, those who can't sell, those who can't finance HR, it's not just that it has to, for HR's sake, be turned on its head. I'm saying for the business's sake, for the sake of a successful outcome, HR has to be sophisticated, beyond compliance and risk management. Necessary but insufficient is what I think.
So how do we fix that issue from those college grads? Because when they're introduced into HR, they're introduced to the transactional administrative side of HR.
And what's interesting is they are, like, the program is all about that. But so many students, if you ask them, why did you get into it? Because I love working with people.
Don't do it.
Wrong answer.
Yeah. Exactly. When in reality, like, the business is people, right? So if you don't love business, how is it that you're getting into HR? Like, I'm so confused by that.
Okay, what advice do you guys have for in Utah? We've got a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that are coming up. What advice do you have of when HR should enter and how that should look? Because if you're going to say, hey, we're a young company, we don't have a lot of funding, but we can get, a generalist who has an MBA, and they hire someone who just went through this transactional HR program, what advice do you give to a startup company that's listening to this that doesn't have HR and is considering it?
Or they have the receptionist, and they're like, hey, you're our HR person.
Which is happens like most of the time.
In
that earliest phase, yeah.
Well, how important is it for you to build and grow a leadership team in a company with a culture that you're proud of and that is really difficult to change later? So if you're really focused on building a culture you think is going to attract and retain talent, you should start thinking about bringing someone that can help you do that. Whether it's the leadership team themselves that focuses on this, and some of our CEOs we've interviewed with lately know how to do that with or without consultancy help. But the earlier you start, the better you'll be long term. You don't have to fix things later, because culture is hard to fix or repair after the fact if you screw it up early on.
Yeah. I will tell you one interesting place for a earlier stage CEO to start is recruiting. So in other words, it's an inevitability. They're not going to hire a VP of HR at like 10 people, and if they do, something's really weird there. So it seems to me like, the first HR function that's needed is probably some form of administration and that kind of thing, because a CEO can scale herself without too much difficulty until they get to the Dunbar's number of 150 employees. But the first moment of sort of outside this CEO's immediate need, as well as some sort of administrative, maybe payroll and benefits and that kind of thing, I think is recruiting. And so I think recruiting like touches on like so many components of the business and so many components of HR. So the question becomes, do you hire a head of HR first who can recruit, or do you hire a recruiter who can maybe kind of step into the HR function? I think it's a hard paradox, because I think HR is the most difficult discipline in business. I really do. So.
You have anything to add to that?
Well, I just want to add something a minute ago. So the thing I would add, just you asked a minute ago, is I think there's two things. One is for Utah. I'm going to give you two answers. One, for Utah to help us. We have a lot of great people that are good with technology, and we have a lot of people that are really good with data. That is a great place for us to start leading in HR here, is figuring out good technology and good data systems. And I think we can do some amazing stuff there in the state to lead. That's one.
That's a great point.
On the side of, I probably have a slightly different lens than Jeff and Dennis. I do think it's important to get talent from the outside. And matter of fact, when I was in my previous role, when I hired business partners, most of them I brought in from outside the state, because I wanted that breadth of experience that they've had. I think the key is, though, that I would add to what Dennis is saying a little bit is I would go out for the very best talent that we have in the organization outside of my function, and that's who I would try to get. All too often we take the person that's kind of failed. Oh, yeah, come on over to HR. You guys were mentioning that. That's crap. We should not do that.
No way.
We should go for the stars.
Yeah.
And I think we have a great story, exactly what you're saying, that, this is the least understood. We have the most potential to have go talk to any CEO. What's one of their top 3 priorities? It is people.
It's always people.
Always.
Always.
And so if that's one of their top 3, why can't we attract others? And I don't think we go fight for it enough. It's always like, they need to go in this. Well, no, why not here? Because I can go sell and kill it in sales, but what happens if I have an HR person helping the whole sales team kill it?
Yeah.
Wow, we can have such bigger impact.
And one great area in that regard for HR professionals to get started is leadership. I just am amazed at how little so many managers know about leadership. It just kind of blows my mind. And yet it's a pretty knowable discipline. It's a broad discipline, but there are a lot of resources and thought leaders on the subject, and I just feel like there's so much to be known there that an HR professional could help a manager not just manage, not just the KPIs, but also in terms of leadership. So
yeah, I actually would totally agree with you. A.G. Lafley was the CEO when I was at P&G, and he used to say the scarcest resource in the corporate world is leadership.
Yeah.
And I really fundamentally agree with that. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have as HR, right? Like I can lead a horse to water and I can show them how to help build a great organization.
Yeah.
But if they don't buy into it and understand it and have their heart bought into it,
Yeah.
that's going to be really hard for me to create that
and,
change.
And so many problems in business require a leadership solution, and managers are so prone to finding administrative managerial solutions to address a leadership problem. I can see Jeff nodding his head because we've seen this pain before.
Over and over.
Yeah. So, and like a managerial solution is like, well, let's just give them a raise, or, let's put them on a PIP or something like that. And that's all good and great, whatever. But like, sometimes it's about connection. Sometimes it's actually understanding what drives that person, what they're stoked about, what they can't stand, whatever. And there's not a lot of like proxies for, accomplishing that I know of that are better than just time spent. Honestly, got to get to know people. And that's a leadership thing.
I like that topic that you brought up before about the importance of, or as an idea, an entry into this through the recruiting lens, because recruiting, you also gain that sense of urgency in the business.
Yeah.
You feel these pain points of managers. You understand, like, you have to start to learn how this is impacting the business, because when this position goes unfilled, it's impacting the business in this way.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you that on a parallel path of maybe it's not necessarily coming from an accounting function or a marketing function, but a good transition point for somebody that really has a sales mentality going into and stepping their foot into HR, but then possibly being able to progress from there. I'm also a big advocate, and you guys can weigh in on this as well, but I've long since said I would rather pay somebody, an outside entity that does it really well, whether it's a PEO or whatever it is, to say, handle the benefits and payroll and compliance. You do that really well for a lot of companies. That's not the value that I bring to the organization, and it's not specific to my organization. So if it can be scaled outside of my business, I don't see the value add there, and I've long since said that. But I'd be interested to know you guys to weigh in on that.
Yeah, if I could just have one idea we found that works really well. Our best leaders in our business are not in HR, they're in other functions, and they don't always want to move to HR full time. So when we do things like leadership development, which I would argue is one of the most important things an HR leader who's strategic should do, going back to your point, let's get our leaders up to speed, therefore we leverage across the organization. And maybe we should pull other leaders in who have demonstrated strong leadership skills to help train them. So we go out to our organization, pull the best leaders in, and have them help facilitate some of our leadership training. And that leverages across the organization and builds a better bench of people who can help train our leaders. So that's been successful for us.
Totally agree. I think it's great using leaders as teachers and really helping them when they have those leadership strengths, how to leverage that. As long as they don't have those glaring weaknesses that everybody recognizes.
Avoid the big derailers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so human resources, I'm kind of getting this feeling overall that like it still is a very misunderstood profession. I mean, even from the CEO down, they really don't understand the value of what HR can provide. What advice would you give to tenured HR people that have been working in HR their entire career and are established. How do they get away from what they've always done and enter into this new realm where you guys are living and playing in the strategy that you're thinking of?
Sell some stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a tough one because, you know, if someone's a real tenured HR person, that they've kind of keyed in on what they're good at, and it's both, you know, a good thing and maybe also a little bit of a challenge for them to step outside of themselves a little bit. I had a leader who used to say that the definition of sophistication is knowing what you're not good at, you know. And I think, I don't know, I think that's tough sometimes. Knowing, you know, being aware of what we don't know is, I think, challenging. But you know, but I will tell you, if you've been a recruiter, like, you know how companies hire, you know how they think about hiring, you know what they want, you know the kinds of skills that you know a certain type of talent needs to bring to the table or whatever. So if you've done HR and you haven't been a recruiter, I kind of challenge you to do that a little bit, because it is selling. Like, I can't think of a more challenging sale than recruiting. So
well, and to clarify, there's a difference between recruiting and recruiting.
Yeah.
So if you're
that's a great
posting
point.
job ads
Right,
and
yeah.
skimming through for
Yes.
qualified
Yeah,
candidates,
yeah.
that's different than either headhunting or,
Right.
like you said, like selling a candidate on a position. We're finalizing a CTO search right now, and our top 3 candidates we sourced, like, we got 180 applicants, and none of them made the cut. Like, these last
painful.
3 are like
Yeah.
people that we've gone after, and the negotiation part of it alone is an incredibly eye-opening experience of, for one, for me as the recruiter on this search, to tell the story of why they should come work for my business versus where they're super happy at another competitor right now.
Yeah.
So I think that skill set alone, to just add on to what you said, like, if you are recruiting right now as one of your 10 to 12 jobs as a generalist or a director, I think advancing that to gain some experience on really learning the skill set of, you know, headhunting recruiting is a really big
And pulling
value add.
people in and listening to them and asking them great questions. I will tell you, it's sort of a related thing, but one of my biggest pet peeves of like HR departments, you know, is that the work products that they often produce are just the design and the look and feel of them is just so brutally bad.
Clip art?
Yeah, it's like that, exactly. And it's like, you know, with Scotch tape slapped up someplace. You know,
You talking about my team?
yeah. your discipline and your team has a brand, and you have to decide what you want that brand to be. And if you want it to not be administrative, and if you want to step into this new world, we have got to be thinking about the brand of the discipline and how that is situated within the brand of the company, and pull that stuff together. Because I will tell you, I think that marketing departments and the HR teams should be like arms locked.
Combined.
Oh, they should just be loving on each other all the time. I really do.
So I give 3 quick things that I think would enable that. One is every HR person should really understand and assess that not all work is created equal. There's non-essential work we do. There's compliance work, which we've talked briefly about. There's business essential. There's competitive enabling and competitive work. What is that competitive work that our business needs from us? And if you don't know that, you should spend time with the business leaders trying to understand that. The second thing I would say is being willing to take risks. And you know, we should always be pushing the boundaries and be willing to fail, and frankly be willing to lose our jobs over some things. I know that one sounds scary, but I just think sometimes we ought to have either a big enough backbone for a certain reason, or just be willing to take risks, or be willing to move on because we believe so strongly about creating change in an organization.
Right. Yeah.
I think the third one is if you don't know how to do it, outside of taking risks, get a mentor, get a consultant. I am a huge fan. I've had fantastic mentors throughout my life, and you know, at first they were from Procter & Gamble, but as I moved on, there wasn't a lot that I found in the companies, and so I found external ones. People that have philosophies that you're interested in, that resonate with you. You know, call them, ask them if they'll mentor you, coach you, whatever. I'm just a huge fan. I found if those 3 things are true, a lot of times you can change. You can make a difference and start driving work differently.
Okay, so let's go with this mentorship thing, because I'm really curious. some of you are really involved in the community and some of you aren't as much because you're running humongous companies. How do you find that balance of volunteering, of giving back, of helping mentor other people, and how do you find that tribe of people you want to stick close to? What advice would you give to somebody who is saying, yeah, I want to mentor and I want to get out there, but all I know of is like SHRM, and SHRM is the administrative stuff and not where we want to be. So what advice do you give on the tribe?
I think you have to find things that you really care about and are passionate about. So, for example, I'm involved with the Women's Leadership Institute, and that's where I receive mentoring and possibly give mentoring in some cases as well. And it's something I care about. It's not part of our HR profession, and it doesn't necessarily need to be for you to step out and do things in the community. So, SHRM isn't always the only place you should go to.
Isn't always? I mean,
Just saying.
it should never be the only place.
I think if you're at any level in the organization, you've got to constantly be learning. And if your company's not offering you some different ways of thinking, you should be networking outside to find different ways of thinking, and you should anyway. As a leader of an organization, I feel like it's really important for me to stay abreast of all the changes that are happening, what's going on. Some of that's reading. I think sometimes it's attending conferences, but I like just hanging out with Dennis and Jeff and saying, what are you doing in your org? And I think those are really important. I was here in the Valley a few years ago, and I focused on my job, and I didn't network well. And when that job didn't work out for me, it was really hard to find something. And so when I've come back, I made a commitment to spend a lot of time, and I am super grateful. And I would tell everybody, if you're not carving, you at the end of the day, a lot of HR jobs, especially more even mid-senior, you've got autonomy to make decisions of where you spend your time. And if you don't take a little bit of time to connect, you're only hurting yourself.
That's good advice. Okay, Trent, you said something a minute ago I also want to ask all of you. You got to take risks and be willing to lose a job over something. What is an idea that each of you have had, if you can think of one, that was a big enough risk?
I got a great
Boom!
one.
Dennis is ready.
I got a great one. I do, exactly. I have a list of. I have two that come to mind real quickly. I'll speak to them quickly. The first one was the V100, the first year that we did the V100, which was like an entrepreneurial kind of affinity thing. It was Greg Warnock's idea, but at some point he sort of heaped it on me. This is when I was at VSpring to put together. And I'm just going to be honest. And we worked with a group of interns from BYU and the U. The entire time I thought to myself, there's just no way this is going to be successful. I was just so cynical about it. But I also felt like I have to see this through. And so I did, and it completely worked. So it wasn't quite like, hey, this is my idea, and I'm going to put but I will tell you one. And I'm going to just, I guess, divulge some details, and hopefully it won't get me in trouble. But we'll just say one of my companies was paying a lot of money for benefits, and I was completely convinced that they needed to go a different direction, and I built a spreadsheet that was just like humongous, and I convinced the executive team and the board that we would save $1 million, and we did. And first of all, I didn't expect them to actually say yes. I was kind of like this. Well, in fact, one of the board members said to me, "You know the number one cause of death among heads of HR?" I go, "No." He goes, benefits change out, or open enrollment or whatever. And I was super intimidated, but that's exactly how much we ended up saving. We went from a fully funded plan to a partially self-funded plan. And of course, there's a lot of risk on the partially self-funded side that you can't really account for, But we also had stop loss and whatnot, and so it sort of helped with everything. But yeah, that was one. The influence work that I had to do to get that done and then save $1 million was not small.
It's awesome.
So I'm glad I did it.
So I can't think of a specific example, but I'd always be willing to go to the mat when it comes to how we live our core values. What's really important to us, and when someone's threatening that, I either get them to change their mind and help them understand why it's important for the business to not threaten that, or we choose to do something else.
I'm smiling at Jeff right now because I can so see him doing that. I can just so see you like, that is not, is that like, I challenge whether, is that us? Is that really us? I could see you doing that to the CEO, to anyone in the board, like you. I could see that there would be nobody that you wouldn't like do that with. I think that's super
Can you tell us about the ribbon cutting ceremony? Because I think that's a good example of this.
So as part of our culture and structure, initially it was especially focused on disrupting the industry and doing things differently. And we had a new building we were moving into and had the traditional ribbon cutting ceremony set up with dignitaries and employees and their families. But our CEO chose to do it differently to represent the fact that our culture is disruptive and we're not going to do things the way everyone else would.
That's weird. I can't
Going-
imagine
going
him
to the
doing
court-
something like that.
No,
Core
and for
values.
those of you who know of Josh Coach, you'll know that this is not even funny to hear about. So he dressed up in our panda suit, which is our mascot, and had a real flamethrower and burned through the ribbon in front of all of the dignitaries and people with a very large flame that nearly started people on fire, but represented very well we don't do things normally. We're going to do it our way, and it's going to be disruptive, and it's going to be different. And it's not just a regular ribbon cutting ceremony around here.
And it was about the core value, not the compliance issues of
Right.
having an open flame.
Bam.
Or burning people up, or burning himself up. You know, all the things that could have possibly gone wrong.
It's awesome.
That's cool. That is
That's
a cool
awesome.
story.
Trent, anything come to mind?
Yeah, the thing I'd tell you is, I was at a company that was acquired, and our acquiring company had a very different philosophy in multiple ways that did not take care of our people the same way, similar to what Jeff said. And, I took on that CEO in a lot of ways, and it hurt. And there's a reason I'm not at that company, right? But I'm willing. I think all of us have to have a line that we're willing to fight for. And I believe that part of our role is to fight for people, and making things right and good for them. And I just get frustrated when I watch HR people be the wallflower that aren't willing to stand up for what needs to happen or the right thing because they're too afraid of their jobs.
I mean, that's the recipe for fascism, is it not? I mean, it really is. Yeah. And we've seen that in the last year or two with companies I probably won't mention, but especially out of Silicon Valley, like that. Like there are articles right now written about HR professionals and how they're really just sort of like the henchmen or the Gestapo for the CEO. It just cannot be that way.
Okay, we're running short on time, but a final question I would like to toss out there, and Dennis, I'll address this one to you. What advice do you have for people who want to transition to the C-suite? And you have been a CEO before. How does HR get there, and what lessons do we need to know to make that jump?
My advice is to consider every aspect of the business your business, not in a nosy kind of way, but like I have a chip on my shoulder. I can't stand the idea of an executive knowing something, about sales or marketing or whatever that I don't know, and not just in terms of data points, but how to think about stuff. And so I'm a restless soul. Like I can't bear the thought of not knowing things that I'm supposed to know. So for me, that's been the key, or a key has just been, staying on top of every discipline, which is, especially with technology and so much change, very difficult to do, but it just has been. And frankly, if you ask me, okay, so Dennis, what are you first? It's not an HR person, it's a salesperson.
I was going to say, I go sell stuff.
It is. I think I'm a salesperson, and I aspire to be a data nerd, like in a really big way, and I have this like romantic relationship with marketing, but like really, it really is weird. Yeah, believe me. And y'all just met John Yoon, so it gets really weird. But I'm like this reluctant HR person who is sort of has this, like. I guess I'll use this love affair with every other business discipline. What else can I say?
That's awesome.
That's how I feel.
You have a love contract with marketing.
Yeah, exactly. I've already, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's how it is for me. Yeah, exactly.
Jeff, Trent, anything you guys want to add in what you've seen successful transitions from HR to other functions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's incumbent on any HR leader to just do what Dennis talked about and know the business. So, for example, if your CEO came to you today and said, put together a business plan for the business, not just for HR, could you do that? And do enough insights into the business where you could do that, at least reasonably well, maybe not perfectly well. I think if people understand the business well enough to put something like that together and think about it from a strategic business perspective in every aspect, that helps prepare them. If they're not ready to do that yet, they should get ready to do that. Maybe that includes some stretch assignments, working with their other business leaders, learning their business, helping them put together their plans, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So I'd say two things. Number one is if you're looking to get into a C-suite job, especially from HR, you should always look at your competition. I don't mean this in a bad way, but in terms of who are you competing against for the biggest pay increase, the next opportunity, whatever, as your peer group. It's the business. It's your finance person, it's your marketing person, it's your salesperson, right? It's not your other HR people. It's not HR people externally. It's the business. And if your company does performance ratings, you should be saying, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm towards the top of the curve, because I'm adding value, not because it's a competition, because I'm good at adding value that the business cares about. So that's one. The second one is, in HR over time, I found that we have a really unique opportunity to learn about strategy. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to provide, strategic thinking to the business that sometimes, especially at these smaller, mid-sized companies, people don't have it. And a lot of the times when you get these companies where the founder is still the CEO at 10, 15, 20 years later, or I was employee number 5, and now they're the CEO, a lot of these guys, they don't know how to do strategy. And I think it's a powerful tool that we can help develop in our careers, wherever we are in HR, in terms of becoming a student of strategy and why is the business making decisions, what are the trade-offs, what are we doing to really gain competitive advantage that's sustainable long-term. Because we're the ones that should be thinking about capabilities and thinking about org design and all these things, right? So frankly, we have a skill set that others don't have. And if we leverage it right, we really should be one of those most valued people on the team.
We should have the highest context of any employee, and context should matter dearly to us. Yeah, and we do have. What's the phrase about the skills? I have skills that others don't have, or something like that. I'm thinking of Liam Neeson right now, because I will take people down. I'm just kidding.
I will find you and I will kill you.
That's right.
Okay, thank you guys so very much for your time today. You're true disruptors of our profession. You're doing some amazing things here in Utah. It's just been a pleasure talking to the 3 kings of HR.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.